Okay, so let's continue with the fundamentals of structural geology. And in today's and maybe tomorrow's class, what we are going to discuss around the basic concepts of geological contacts, okay, and their applications in structural geology. Attitude of planar, linear, and angular features. We covered a bit of it. We talked about deep strike and trend plunge. We will still see them once more, and what to measure and why. Why do we measure them? The concept of structural measurements, planar and linear features, and their measurements. Okay, so let's uh, go ahead with the lecture. So structural measurements, why, what are they, and why do we do them? Okay. So understanding structures in the field is can be really puzzling sometimes. This is mostly because the exposures are not always continuous. Okay. It's difficult to access, and all features are not present everywhere. This is unavoidable, okay? And such characteristics of field geology, particularly for interpretation of large structure, make the subject extremely challenging. Most of the geological observations, particularly in large scale, are generally two-dimensional. The observations are usually presented in a map, and the third dimension, the relief or the depression, is considerably negligible. However, geological structures are essentially three-dimensional. Okay, although the representation of them is two-dimensional, but the structures are three-dimensional. So one has to interpret 3D geometry of structures unless considered otherwise. Okay. Rocks display various types of geometrical elements at different scales. The elements can be broadly classified as planar or linear elements. We talked about them. So linear elements are called lineaments, as we say. Now, beddings, foliation, cystosity, cleavage. Yeah, I hope you are familiar with all these terms. Bedding. This is mostly a sedimentological nomenclature. Bedding means any rock unit, a bed. Then foliation is generally used um, in case of metamorphic uh, stratification. Cystosity is also used for metamorphic stratification, and then cleavage. Okay, all these things are planar features. Okay, they are all planes. And then there are geological features like fold axis, mineral lineation, paleocurrent direction. We gave the example of fold axis and paleocurrent direction, if you remember. They are typically lines. Okay? So what we need to do as structural geologists, we should be able to identify beddings, foliations, cystosity, cleavages, fold axis, mineral lineation, paleocurrent directions, etc., which are either planes or lines, and we should be able to measure them. And how do we measure them? We use geological instruments like spectrometers, spectrometers, planes. Okay. So stratigraphic sequence or geological contacts. The establishment of lithological and stratigraphic sequence is a prerequisite interpreting the large-scale structures or the at the end history of the area. Any structural information has little meaning without its lithological, sedimentological, or petrological and age context. Okay, so as I always say, that all these subjects are so interlinked with each other. You know, you cannot study structural geology without the knowledge of sedimentology, and vice versa. Okay, so these subjects, these measurements, these approaches do not stand on their own. They are always interdependent with other subjects too. Okay, so now let us see some of the examples of geological contacts. Okay, now you see here in the first picture there are 3 beds. Okay, we are calling them beds simply because they are sedimentary layering, right? They are sedimentary layering. Okay. Now what I see here, that I have a sandstone bed, I have a shell bed, and then I have a limestone bed. Okay. Now the sandstone bed is around 520 million years old, the shell is 470 million years old, and the limestone is 442 million years old. Okay, so I have a yonging direction towards the top, and the beds are horizontal. So this type of rock units, if I find in the field, we call them as normal sequence or stratigraphy, normal sequence or normal stratigraphy. Now, what I am observing here, if I compare picture 1 with picture 2, what I am seeing that I have a sandstone layer, number 1. Then I have the shell layer, sorry, the limestone layer, number 3. But the shell layer is kind of missing in between. So I have a 570 million year old rock, and then I have a 442 million year old rock. Something in between is kind of missing. Okay. So what could have happened? The first possibility is that the shell layer would have been eroded, or the second possibility is that it was not deposited at all. Okay. So what I am observing between this limestone and the sandstone, there is a sequence of rock which is missing. Okay. There is a hiatus, there is a time gap in between, and that rock record is missing. And such contact, where we observe such time gap between 2 rock units, in this particular case it is bedding, we call them as unconformity. Okay. Okay. Now the third thing that I am observing here, the third example, what I am seeing here, that as if the first sequence has just been inverted. Okay. So I am seeing the oldest rock at the top, then I am seeing the intermediate age rock, which is the shell, and the limestone, which is the youngest rock that sits at the bottom. Okay. So this is an inverted sequence or an inverted stratigraphy. Okay. And then the last one, the fourth picture that I am observing here, I am seeing a limestone unit. Okay. And on the either side of it, so 3. So on the either side of it, I find the shell and the sandstone. Okay. So the limestone is of 442 million years old. The shell on the either side is of 470 million years old, and the sandstone on the either side is around 520 million years old. Okay, so I see a repetition of stratigraphic sequence. Yeah.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
So I'm not able to understand the unconformity wala sequence. Like for to know unconformity, we should first know the normal sequence, right?
Yeah, but in general, when you are in the field, you might not find a normal sequence always. So if you find a normal sequence well enough, then if you are at a second exposure and you see that particular layer is missing, that is always an advantage. Yeah, you can say that there is an unconformity,
So
but that might not be the case always.
we are able to comprehend that a layer is missing based on the time period.
Based on a time period, number 1, and number 2, there could be some difference in attitude. Say, for example, the sandstone could be, having a separate dip and strike, and the shell, the limestone at the top, would have been a different of dip strike. Okay, so that unit in between could also be an unconformity, and this is what we call as an angular unconformity.
Also, sir, I need to ask about this deviation which is in the time frame. So the
Which deviation?
the deviation in the time frame, it's like 40 million years and 15 million years and 18 million years. So why is
Okay,
this?
that
Hello? Hello? Uh, is he audible?
hello.
Sir, you weren't audible.
Okay, I thought perhaps I was I went out of network, I guess.
Yeah,
Can you see my screen now? Am
yeah,
I
yeah.
still presenting? Okay. So what was your question? You were asking about these error margins, right?
Yes, sir. The
That plus
deviation.
minus 18, plus minus 15. That's what you were asking.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So that comes from the method by which you have dated that particular rock. Okay. So I mean, either you can date a rock by radiometric dating. Okay. So radiometric dating. That means you look for isotopic signature in a rock and you study their half-life and you date a rock. So radiometric dating is one. And number two is you study the fossils. Okay. In both cases, it is not a perfect method. Okay. In both cases, you have some sort of error margin associated with them, and that is what is being given in these cases. That's what you wanted to ask.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now, as I was saying, so so the first thing is, of course, if you already have studied rock unit 1, and if you are going next, rock unit 2, and you see that shell layer is missing, then you immediately know that there is perhaps an unconformity. If you look at something like this, where you see that the sequence at the bottom has a different dip strike, and the sequence at the top has a different dip strike, you again know that there is an unconformity. Okay, sometimes you do see that between two beds, okay, so this is bed A, this is bed B. Between these two beds, there is an erosional surface. You can observe that. You can find out in the field with your trained eyes. You can find an erosional surface, and there you will again can postulate the possibility of an unconformity. But there could be a situation where I don't actually see any erosional surface between A and B. I don't see any sort of difference in attitude. Okay, then to be sure whether there is an unconformity, I have to date this rock A and B. Okay, if I see that they are like of a continuous age sequence, then I know that there is no unconformity. But then I find this one to be of, say, for example, uh, uh, of Triassic, okay, and then I find the sequence A is of Cretaceous, okay. So I know that there is this whole sequence of Jurassic is missing in between, okay. But in the field, I will not be able to distinguish in this particular case because there is no such field evidence. Was that clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So these are the different types of contacts that will be of our interest, particularly contact number 3 and contact number 4. Okay, 3 and 4, where I find repetition of beds and where I find inverted sequence. In both the cases, my mind should tell me that there is some sort of structural disturbance that must have gone into into the process. Okay. So if you observe an inverted sequence, if you observe repetition of beds, immediately your structural geological brain should start thinking. And also, if you find angular unconformity, by the way, your mind should start thinking some sort of structural deformation. Okay? So we will look for angular unconformity, we will look for an inverted sequence, and we will look for repetition of beds, which will be fairly indicative of structural disturbances. Why? I will discuss later. Okay, so stratigraphic sequence, things to remember: layering in deformed metamorphic rocks, which is called secondary layering. So primary, there are two types of layering in rocks. So primary layering, which are generally sedimentary, and we call them as bedding, right? As I just said. Okay. And then there is something called secondary bedding, secondary layering, which is generally developed after due to the metamorphism, okay, due to metamorphic processes. Okay, that could be parallel to the primary layering or might not be parallel to the primary layering, because there is a precursor rock, that has gone through your metamorphic processes and the metamorphic rock is produced, right? So there were some layerings to start with, because of which is of primary nature, which is due to the sedimentary deposition. Okay. Now there could be another imposition of layering because of the metamorphism, which we call as secondary layering, that could be parallel or might not be parallel to the primary layering of the precursor rock. So layering in deformed metamorphic rock, which is called secondary layering, does not necessarily represent bedding, okay, as I just said. Thus, it is important wherever possible to demonstrate the existence of bedding and stratigraphy, which can be obtained by identification of sedimentary structures that define the way up of the beds. Way up means younging up direction. Selecting a distinctive marker horizon is useful to picture regional structure. We shall learn more about it in the foliation lecture. We'll talk about foliation later. A deformation structure is necessarily younger than the age of the host rock. This is an important point to remember. Okay, so for example, I have a primary layering, of course, and then that got deformed. I create a fold. What it is intuitive for me that this deposition happened earlier, the deformation came later. The deformation cannot precede deposition. Okay, this is always younger than the depositional processes. Okay, of course, you need something to be deformed, right? And that something will be formed by the deposition or the primary processes. And unconformity in stratigraphy marks the time of a major tectonic event. So why, I will explain that later on. Sometimes what happens, I'll just give you a brief answer. This time of erosion and time of non-deposition is often associated with a major uplift. What happens? Let me just explain that. It's a very important concept. So please pay as much attention as you can. Let me just put a new slide. Let's discuss that part. It's a very fundamental concept in geology. Okay, just so pay as much attention as you can. Okay. So the statement that I had, that most of the unconformities are associated with major structural events. Okay, why we are saying that? So suppose I am looking at a geomorphic landscape. Okay, I'm looking at a landscape. So suppose this is my mean sea level. Okay, this is my mean sea level, MSL. You know what is mean sea level? We discussed that before in gravity. Okay. Now, what I see, that there are some parts of the area are actually having positive relief. That means it is higher than the MSL. And then there are some parts which is below the MSL, which is having negative relief. Now, all these geomorphic processes or surface processes, all the surface processes like the river, the wind, okay, surface processes, like river, wind, etc. What they try to do, they try to do something, a particular uh, phenomena which we call as peniplanation. What does peniplanation mean? Peniplanation means that all these surface processes tries to remove any positive relief that are present, okay, and so it will erode the positive relief and actually deposit that material that it has eroded into the negative relief. Okay, and that process is going on continuously. Okay, so in one hand it is eroding the positive relief and it is depositing in the negative relief. Okay, that is what it is trying to do, and this process is called peniplanation. Okay. Now this is happening in one side. So from here what I understand, that if I have a positive relief, the natural tendency of that positive relief is to be eroded. Okay. And if I have a negative relief, we call that negative relief also as accommodation space. And the nature of that negative relief is always to be deposited. Okay. So a rock layer cannot be deposited unless you have a negative relief. Okay, that is where only, you know, a basin will form, and that is where the rock sequence will develop. Okay. Now, suppose a sequence of rock is being developed. Okay, and all on a sudden I observe an unconformity. Now, unconformity means what? I said unconformity means a plane of erosion or non-deposition. So when does erosion or non-deposition happen? That will only happen if this negative relief is transformed. Negative relief is transformed to a positive relief. Yeah. So why would a negative relief transform to a positive relief? And that will happen because upliftment. Upliftment means this rock sequence will come up. There will be an upliftment, and we discussed about upliftment when we talked about isostasy as well. You know, so there must be an upliftment, and such upliftment are often associated with tectonism. Okay. Hence, we say that if we find an unconformity, a plane of erosion or non-deposition, it is often associated with tectonism, because to have a unconformity means your negative relief situation is kind of changed to a positive relief situation. Yeah, and such situation can only happen because of an upliftment, and upliftment is often associated with tectonism. Is that part clear? Tell me. This is a very fundamental concept, and you can ask many people around and you will find that they don't know. So although it is very, very simple as well, but I want all of you to understand this, from the bottom of your heart. Is anyone who is not clear with this concept? Why such erosion and non-depositional surfaces are associated with upliftment and tectonism? Tell me. Huh? Anyone? Am I still online? Okay. Anyone has any question around it? Everyone understood? Okay, fantastic. Okay. The last point, inverted stratigraphy or repetition of stratigraphic sequence also suggests single or multiple deformation events in the host rock. We will discuss that why later on. So what to measure? The sediments are deposited and or precipitated along horizontal planes. This is called the law of horizontality. You will learn about the law of horizontality in your principles of stratigraphy lecture, and subsequently lithified to form rock strata. You know how sedimentary rocks are formed. After deformation, the horizontal strata do not necessarily remain horizontal. That is a fundamental thing to understand. Okay. So if I find tilted strata, that would immediately, tell us that there is some sort of deformation going on. So, by the way, if this is, says, for example, a set of horizontal beds, okay, what would be the deep of this bed, ladies and gentlemen? What would be the deep of this bed?
So 0 degree.
0 degree. What would be the strike of this bed?
Sir, it depends. Okay, strike.
What was the definition of strike?
So the angle between the north direction and the um,
And the
horizontal
and the
sir,
intersection between the plane and
intersection.
the horizontal plane. So I said these are horizontal planes. Horizontal plane के साथ horizontal plane का क्या है? Intersection. So there is no strike of a horizontal bed. Horizontal bed के साथ horizontal bed का क्या intersection होगा? नहीं होगा ना? They are parallel planes. So you can say infinite number of lines, right? So उसका कोई horizontal beds का कोई strike नहीं होता. Deep zero होता है. ठीक है? Remember that always. Neither it does have a deep direction. Okay, everyone. Now I look at two sets of rocks. The first picture you are seeing on the left. Okay, what I am observing, are the rocks right now horizontal? Are the rocks horizontal?
No.
No. So they are, what type of rocks they are? They are tilted, right? So if I observe such tilted rocks in the first picture, if I observe such tilted rocks, that would give me an immediate indication that this is some sort of deformation going on. So if I ask you, let me just, something wrong happened. A moment. Just one moment. Why is an extended display? Just give me one moment. Now this is better. Now let's look at these two pictures. Okay. Now let us say that I'll ask you some questions. Now let us say that this is north. This direction is north. This direction is east. Okay, I don't need anything else. Now tell me, what would be the strike of these beds, more or less? What is the strike of these beds? Huh?
North, south.
Yeah, so I can write 0 degree or 180 degree, right? Doesn't matter, or north, south. The deep is around how many degrees it will be? So deep is the angle between the horizontal and the plane itself. Okay, around how much it will be? Around 60 degrees or so? Huh? Even maybe steeper, maybe 75 degrees. And dips towards which direction? They're dipping towards, what is the dip direction?
East.
East.
Dips तो क्या लिखेंगे हम इधर पे?
90 degree.
9. So that's how I can represent these beds, right? So I am observing a set of beds which are dipping towards east, tilted beds. Okay, and by looking at them, I can say that all of them are dipping in the same direction. Okay, they're all dipping in the same direction. Set of beds. Okay, such structure is called monocline. Okay, remember, monocline means set of beds which are dipping. All of them are dipping more or less of the same amount towards the same direction. Okay, they are called monocline. So if I observe a monocline, even a monocline, that would give me an indication that there is perhaps some sort of deformation going on, simply because fundamentally with deposition the rocks are horizontal. So there is a deviation from horizontality, so there must be some sort of deformation. Okay. Now let's look at this particular. Now another thing I have to tell you, if you find such rock units, okay, always remember. So if I look at this horizontal sequence of rock, this is 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that means 4 is youngest, okay, and 1 is oldest. Okay, so 4 is youngest, 1 is oldest. Now, if I find a set of rocks like this, how do I know what is my direction of younging? Generally, the direction of younging is along its dip direction. Okay, so that means if I now name the rocks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1 is my youngest rock. Always remember that. Okay, this is a fundamental rule to understand in a monocline. Unless some other information is given to you, in a monocline, you will always find the younger rocks towards the deep direction. Okay, so younger rocks in a monocline. Younger rocks towards deep direction. Okay? Now let us look at the second picture. क्या दिख रहा है second picture में? What are you observing in the second picture? Tell me. Can you see some layers? And what has happened to the layers? So first of all, tell me whether you are looking at a plan section or a profile section. Plan view or a profile view? It's a profile view, right? Hello, are you there, everyone?
Yes, sir.
So you are looking at a profile view. What are you observing otherwise? Are these rocks horizontal? Are these strata horizontal?
No, sir.
So how there is like a folding going on, right?
Yes.
Can you all appreciate this sort of folding? And then there is also some sort of folding going on here, you can see. Like this. Okay. Now, if I name this rock A, this rock B, this rock C, this rock D, this rock E, what I am observing here, what we have just discussed, what I am observing here, if I am starting from this point, sorry, if I am starting from point X to point Y, okay, if I am going from here to here, what I am observing, what is happening? Do I see repetition of beds? Huh?
Yes.
Repetition of beds, essentially, there could be a situation where you don't actually see the fold. Okay. This part could be eroded, this part could be eroded. This part of the rock could be eroded. You might not be able to see them in the field. So you don't always know that there is a fold. But if you observe such repetition of beds, that would also should ring your bell that there must be some sort of deformation going on. Okay? Now, of course, you can see there are many other things which we will discuss. That there are two limbs of these folds. One of the limb is steeper, the other limb is gentler. I hope you can appreciate that. Yeah, but we will discuss that later on. And you can, of course, calculate the deep strike and deep direction of all the beds as well. So if I look at this bed and if I look at this bed, what is will the strike of these beds be similar, same or different? This set of beds and this set of beds, So this side of the bed and this side of the bed. Okay, you got my point. Will the strike be same or different? Tell me. Yash, tell me whether the strike will be same or different.
I'm not sure, sir.
Why not? Try to think
Sir,
in
same.
3D.
Sir, same.
Same होगा ना?
Yeah, I was.
Yes, sir.
Strike same होगा. Deep direction same होगा कि different होगा?
That will be same.
Deep direction will be same. What would be different then?
The depths of
Amount of dips will be different. Excellent. The amount of dips will be different. The strike will be same. The dip direction will be same. Only the amount of dip will be different. Very good. Okay, so the structural measurements, we talked about it before. We have points, lines, and planes. I'm not getting into the details, of course, right now, but you will all know about them. Okay, so a particular line can be defined as azimuth. Azimuth is nothing but trend. Okay, inclination is plunge. Okay, they're often also called azimuth and inclination. It's the same thing. Azimuth is trend. Inclination is plunge. Okay, we talked about that in greater detail. Okay. Now these are the. Now let us see how many words do you know right now. Do you know deep? What is deep? Do you know trend? Strike, plunge, attitude, deep direction, azimuth, deep angle. How many you don't know? You don't know about front bearing. You don't know about apparent dip. You don't know about back bearing. You don't know about pitch. Okay, front bearing and back bearing, we will talk about them, and apparent dip, we will talk about them in the lab class. Okay, but let us see the other one important particular parameter which we call as pitch. Okay? That we will see pitch and rake. They are actually the same thing, but we will see what is that. But then the rest of the names like front bearing, back bearing, and apparent dip, we will learn in depth in the lab class. Okay, so now you know about deep and deep. What is deep? What is strike? What is dip direction? So I am not explaining once more. Okay, you know about strike, dip, and dip direction. Now there is only one thing which is pitch that I will explain. Now suppose let's just take a simple. Yeah, we can do it here itself. Suppose this is a plane of our interest, okay? This is a plane of our interest, and then this is the strike line of the plane. Now, suppose there is a lineament which is present on the plane itself. So there is a line. Okay, so there is a line which is on the plane itself. Okay? Like for example, here they have also drawn a line. So the angle between the strike of that plane and that line, this theta, yeah, this is what we call pitch or the rake. Here they have written as C. Okay? So the angle between the line, the lineament which sits on that particular plane, and the strike between that line and the strike of that particular plane, that angle theta or C is called the pitch or the rake of that particular line. Okay, clear? Any doubt about it? Okay, I hope not. Now you see another important thing we can just simply discuss about apparent dip for a moment. Let's get rid of this one so that we are not clumsy. So you see, when we discussed about dip, we said this is the dip direction. This is the dip direction, right? And this is the dip angle, right? This is the dip angle. Anna, this is what we said is the dip angle. Now you see, I am measuring the dip angle. I am measuring the dip angle, yeah, on a line parallel to the dip direction. I am measuring the dip angle on a line parallel to the dip direction, okay, or perpendicular to the strike. That is where I am essentially projecting. I am projecting this particular line, this dip direction line on the plane itself, and then measuring that angle. That is my dip, right? Now there could be a situation where I have a traverse. That traverse is not perpendicular to the strike. So the traverse is here, okay, which is not perpendicular to the strike, which is not along the dip direction horizontally. Okay, and then I can also project that on the plane. Okay, and there will be an angle theta dashed, and this is what is theta dashed is called apparent dip. Okay. The other one, the theta, the one that I have discussed before, is called dip or true dip, and this is what we call as apparent dip. So apparent dip is the dip measured on a traverse which is not perpendicular to the strike. Yeah. The apparent dip is a dip that is measured on a traverse which is not perpendicular to the strike, which is not along the dip direction. And remember that apparent dip theta dashed is always less than theta. So true dip must be greater than the apparent dip. So there will be some relationship, that geometrical relationship that you can calculate, which we will do it in our lab class between the apparent dip and true dip. It might often happen that on a map you have to calculate apparent dip. I mean, the only choice you will have to calculate apparent dip, and then you have to calculate true dip from there. Okay. For the time being, remember apparent dip is the dip measured along a line which is not perpendicular to the strike line. Okay. Now, as I said, I don't know if you remember, I have already shown you how to actually measure dip, strike, trend, plunge with a clinometer compass. But for the time being, I don't think this is a good idea to explain clinometer compass without a clinometer compass in a virtual class. So we will take a clinometer compass with us and measure dip, strike, trend, plunge once more in the lab class. Okay, that's what we are going to do. So I'm skipping this part. Okay. So this is how, I will recommend that this is the convention that you follow. Okay. Because I think this is the most straight. There are other conventions of writing dip strike, but I strongly recommend to follow this particular convention to actually write dip strike. Okay. So this is strike. The first one is strike. Second is the dip angle, and the third is the dip direction. Okay. This is what I recommend, and please follow this one. There are some signs which are used in the map to show dip strike. Say, for example, rather than writing 120 degree, you can draw a line. Say, for example, I am trying to indicate normally dipping bed, which has a strike of 120 degree and dip of 45 degree, and that dip towards southwest. Okay, so I can simply draw a 120 degree line. Okay, and then show it like this and write 45 degree here. So that will show me that this will also show that this is a 120 degree strike line, which has a dip of 45 degree of the bed and dips towards southwest. Okay. Now, overturned bed. What are overturned bed? We will discuss later on. Is generally depicted with this sign. We will show what are overturned beds later on. For the timing, you can actually ignore this part. But anyway, just because we are talking about signs, this is how overturned beds are shown. This is how horizontal beds are shown, and this is how vertical beds are shown. Okay. By the way, does vertical beds have strike or not?
Yes, sir.
Yes, it will have a strike, obviously. Okay. Now this is how a trend and plunge is shown. This is how you can see here. This is plunge. This is trend. Okay. You can also indicate with an arrow. Okay. So this is 80 degree trend, 56 degree plunge. Huh? Let's discuss about structural map when we talk about structural maps. Okay. So we will start talking about strain from the last from the next class, and let's see if you have any question today. And we will have our lab class from next week onwards. Okay. So, Adil, you must have seen the email from the UGC. They said that we have to start the classes with the existing students only. So the only thing that I request you, Adil, as the departmental representative, is to find a room where all of you can actually sit with, maintaining the social distance. Okay, at least at least 3 seats you have to leave behind, and then you have to sit. We don't need anything else. Any big classroom will be okay. Okay. So discuss with I don't know whom, and find out which room we can have the class. Any big classroom in the LHC will be fine. Okay, can you find that one out, Adil, and let me know where we can have the class?
Sir, actually, I'm not in campus right now.
Oh, you are not in campus. So who is in campus right now?
Sir, I'm in campus right now.
Okay, Sivats, then can you find out which room can we have the class next week onwards?
Okay, sir.
Okay, so that all of us can actually. How many students right now we have in the campus then? Around 20, you said, na?
Around 25, sir. 23,
Around
25.
25. So 25 students can, I don't know if there will be enough social distancing we can maintain in our ES lab. I don't think we can. What do you think? Can we?
Sir, I don't know how many people have registered for this course, sir, out of the 25.
So the first class we can try at the ES lab.
Sir, first class
Okay,
we can try.
I leave it up to you, and find out where we can have the class with the number of students and everything, and let me know where we can have the class. Okay, I'll go there. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, sir.
Then and then we can find out if there is a problem, then we can sort out the solution later on. All right, then I will stop it here today. Yes, you have a question. Anyone? Any question?
I was just curious.
Yeah.
If I'm not able to attend the lab course this semester,
Why?
I'm not sure if I'm coming back right now. So,
That's why.
yeah,
Okay.
would there be a difference in the understanding level of this course between me and the students who are attending the lab?
Yeah, a little bit, of course.
So would it affect like in the question paper you said, so that
No, I will try to. I will make sure. I will try as much as I can to avoid such questions where your knowledge on the lab will be necessary. But the thing is, it's understanding that matters more than the question papers.
Yes, sir.
So yeah, of course, there is a reason that we have a lab, right?
Yes, sir.
And yeah.
Okay.
So I mean, it will not affect your grades or your questions. I will make sure that such thing doesn't happen. But then, understanding is understanding. That is quite different from the marks that you obtain.
Yes, sir.
That I cannot help. What can I do?
And sir, those who are not in campus right now.
Yeah.
So when will they do the lab?
That is something that you have to ask DUGC. Whenever they will ask me to do the lab, I will do the lab again. That's how it is.
Okay, sir.
But that's I don't know how to. This is beyond my my level of This is beyond my level. I don't exactly know how institute is planning for the people who are coming back later to accommodate their lab. You have seen the email, na, today that UGC has asked us to start the lab.
Yes, sir. I saw it just now.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yes, sir.
So I have to go with the instructions that I get, isn't it? Okay, we'll see. We'll see how we can how these things will happen, take place, and but you all have registered for both. I mean, if you have to register for theory, you have to register for the lab as well, na? Is that how it is?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Anyway, so we will have the lab class this next week only. Sivats, we have this talk today, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Yes, at 6 p.m. you said.
Yes, sir. At 6 p.m.
And have you sent me a link to join already?
Yes, sir. I have sent you the link to join.
Okay, you have. So I will search for it. Okay. Thank you very much, guys. Okay. Bye. Bye.